Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perdichizzi, and thank you for joining me. As always, day one of the 2025 NFL Combine is in the books. I'm here to recap, give my instant reactions to day one. The D-line, which was made up of two groups. You had the big guys, the defensive tackles, kicked it off. Then we had the edge prospects. And then lastly, we concluded with the linebacker prospects. It was an eventful day, some fantastic athleticism being put on display. A lot of guys looking really smooth and fluid in the on-field drills. And I'm going to share my initial instant reactions and thoughts about what I saw from the wire-to-wire coverage that was delivered today. Let's first start with the D-line group. And we're going to start with the first group was 40 defensive tackles hit the field there in Indy. I wish I can say that everybody partake, but it actually was only 19 out of the 21 players actually ran the 40-yard drills. We had more of them than step in and do the on-field drills, which was good to see. But there was a handful of guys that I think came away from the defensive tackle group that I thought were real big winners from the first day. And the first one I want to talk about is Tyrion Ingram Dawkins out of Georgia. I thought he was on that like early day pre-range. I would not be surprised if now we start hearing some buzz that he can maybe be a guy in that round 3, round 4 range instead of that round 4, round 5 range, because he tested out really, really good this today, and he ran really good. His 40-yard dash time was impressive. The first one that he ran was a 4.86, then it was a 4.87. So his 4.86 was the official. He had a 1.69 was his best 10-yard split. He had a 36-inch vertical jump. He had a 10'4" broad jump. He had a 4.34 20-yard shuttle, 7.28 on the pre-cone, and he looked really smooth in the drills. So I thought he was one of the big winners from the first defensive tackle group. Another big winner who really shined, and I thought again was another guy who I thought was more of that early day 3 range, who I think now maybe has elevated his stock to potentially in the day 2 mix, and that is Ty Robinson out of Nebraska. 6'5", 288 pounds. His official 40-yard dash was 4.83. He had a 1.71 10-yard split. He had a 33.5 on the vertical jump. He looked really good in the on-field drills as well. So I think Ingram Dawkins out of Georgia, Ty Robinson out of Nebraska were two of the guys who I thought looked really good from that first group of defensive tackles. Some other guys who I thought stood out, whether it was in the athletic testing or it was in the drills themselves. I thought Darius Alexander out of Toledo. A lot of people have him in their top 50, top 100s. I know he's in Daniel Jeremiah's top 50. His 40-yard dash time was officially 4.95. He had a 1.73, a 1.72 10-yard split, but he looked really good. He was probably one of the smoothest guys I saw in the on-field drill. So I thought he checked boxes today for the performance that we saw. Obviously, we didn't see a lot of the major big names that we wanted to see from the defensive tackle group. We didn't see Mason Graham was going to be a top 8 pick. We didn't see his teammate, Kenneth Grant, who was going to test out as a freak alien athlete himself. So those are two guys. We didn't see them two. We didn't see Walter Nolan, who was going to be another guy that I thought looked really impressive as well. So we didn't see any of those big names there. I thought CJ West looked pretty good, that he had an overall strong day. He ran a 4.95 40 at 316 pounds. He had a 1.73 10-yard dash. He had a 33-inch vertical jump as well, and I thought he looked good in the on-field drills. So I think probably those are the guys that I would say probably came away most impressive. I also thought Derek Harmon just checked off boxes. Now remember, Derek Harmon is a guy who already generated round 1 butts. So I don't think anything really changed with that. but we're talking about a guy at, 6'4", 313 pounds. He ran a 4.95 40. He had a 1.74 10-yard split. I think he just kind of solidified his status as a guy who's going to be going round one, and impressive to just kind of, when we didn't see a lot of the other top end round one caliber defensive tackle prospects, we did see him get out there and do everything. So that was good for Harmon to kind of check those boxes. We saw TJ Sanders not run the 40, but do the on-field drills. I thought he looked pretty good in the on-field drills for that. So I thought the defensive tackle group, because of so many of the big names who didn't partake in it, tested out good, but I think it could have even tested out as really freakish. I think it's one of the strongest groups, if not the strongest group, in the 2025 NFL draft. And I think from watching the performances today, and we were missing a lot of the big names, I came away thinking that this class is as good as advertised. And there's a lot of guys, the depth that's going to be in this class, getting defensive tackles mid-second round, third round, into the fourth round. I think you're going to find guys who are really effective role players. One guy I do want to bring up who I thought, well, he didn't do the 40-yard dash. He did do the jumps, and I'm not sure why he did the jumps if he knew he was going to test like this. Alfred Collins out of Texas, a guy who I'm a fan of in terms of his game. I think right now he was ticketed for most people's round 2. 6'5", 332 pounds. But for a guy who people have a high grade on, his jumps were 26 on the vert and 8 on the broad. Like, I mean, if you just go up and down the numbers, there are not a lot of numbers that are that low. So I thought Alfred Collins, a little bit questionable, not going to run the 40, but you do the jumps. So I think he was, if we're going to, I don't like saying stock down from anybody from this because you have a chance to rebound back at the combine. But in terms of guys that I thought maybe might have hurt their stock a little bit, and I was a little bit surprised at the results, I would put Alfred Collins at the top of that list from the first D-line group to defensive tackles, because I was a little bit surprised with just how poor of a testing it was for him in that regard. A couple other things that maybe stood out here. Jared Harrison Hunt out of SMU, he ran a 4.86 40 with a 1.69 10-yard split and a 32-inch broad. So that was an impressive performance from him. One other guy that I thought looked good in the stuff from the first group. If we take this over to the second defensive line group, which was the edge rushers, predominantly the edge rushers, obviously in their mix with a bunch of guys with different sizes and profiles. Are they 5-techs? Are they traditional 4-3 defensive ends? Are they stand-up guys who are going to be edge rushers? I think we got to start with 2 guys, but standalone, the first guy we got to talk about is Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. Dane Brugler was the first guy on this, so I think he warrants credit that nobody had Shamar Stewart over the last month or two as highly regarded as Dane Brugler, continuously saying he's a top 10 player. He's gonna explode in the pre-draft months, and he's gonna be a top 5, top 10 type guy in this class. And I think now, if you see a mock draft where Shamar Stewart is not in the top 10, I think they're not adapting to what we just saw today. We knew he was going to test out as a really good athlete. He tested out as a great to elite level athlete. I know the production is not what you would have liked it to be, but you are betting on the traits, right? There's once upon a time, Trevon Walker was the first pick in the draft, and it wasn't because gaudy college production. It was because of the traits, the upside, the ceiling of what he could be. And a team is going to look at Shamar Stewart, 6'5", 267 pounds. He ran a 4.59 40 at 267 pounds. He had a 1.58 10-yard dash. He had a 40 on his vertical jump, and he had a 10-11 on his broad jump. 10, 11, and 40 for a player at his size and frame, and also the run a 1.58 10-yard split with a 4.59 40. Absolutely insane numbers that I don't see with that But that type of athleticism, the raw tools that he possesses, I think a team is going to look at him and just say, in a year that we have Travis Hunter, we have Abdul Carter, their ceilings are the highest in the class. I'll put Mason Graham, while he might not be the freakish level athlete, so I could understand somebody maybe saying that his ceiling isn't as high, but I think Mason Graham is going to be such a dominant player and such a really good to great NFL player, and I think he's so safe. But I think after those three guys, take the quarterbacks out of the mix for a second. After those three guys, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, Mason Graham, I think you can make the case Shamar Stewart has the highest ceiling of any other player in the draft. So, yeah, the quarterbacks are going to be mixed in there early on. So between the quarterbacks and then those other guys, I think Shamar Stewart's got a real chance to go somewhere in that like 7 to 9, 7 to 10, 8 to 10 range. And I think this just further solidified that. And teams are going to fall in love with the traits and hope that they can get the production up to the level of traits because he's such a unicorn athlete. So I think he was the biggest winner, but there was a lot of other guys that I thought really looked impressive from the edge group here, which was DL group 2. Another guy I want to talk about is James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee. He actually got his day started with a very suspect vertical jump when he only went for 31 inches, but then his broad jump was 10.3. So that started to show that high-level athleticism. Then he got to the on-field drills, and he ran a 4.4740. He's 245 pounds. When you think about that, when the wide receivers and the running backs run on Saturday, there is not going to be a lot of wide receivers, and there's going to be very few running backs that run faster than a 4.47. And those running backs and those wide receivers, they're going to be somewhere between, like, most of them. Obviously, there's some real small guys, but a lot of those guys are going to be like 180 to 210 or 220 pounds. And James Pierce Jr. was 245. So compared to some wide receivers, he's going to be 40 pounds, 45 pounds heavier. To some smaller running backs, he's going to be 50 or 60 pounds heavier. And he ran a 4.47 with a 1.56 10-yard split. So, and then in the on-field drills, the smoothness, the fluidity that you see from James Pierce Jr., I think speaks volumes on just how impressive of a prospect he is. I know there's been rumblings about some off the field stuff. I don't really like to get into that because I am not privy to anything. But if you just evaluate him on the field, Daniel Jeremiah today mentioned the name Brian Burns, and they had like the graphic that they always put up comparing. I think it's a great comparison between the two in terms of what they bring, their strengths, their developmental areas, the impact they could have on a game. So I thought James Pierce Jr. was the second most impressive performance today after what we saw from the athletic testing of Shamar Stewart. I would say that the next guy that I think really stood out was Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. We're talking about a guy who's 6'6", 254, and 264. He ran a 4.68 40 with a 1.65 10-yard split. He had a 40.5 vertical jump and a 10.9 broad jump. And then for a guy 6'6" and that weight, he looked pretty smooth and fluid in the on-field drills. You saw him leverage and how high they are in terms of their movement skills, always an issue for a guy like that. But he looked good in the on-field drills. He tested out as an elite level athlete. So I think Landon Jackson right there with James Pierce Jr., with Shamar Stewart were the three most impressive performances we saw. But that wasn't just the end of it. There was a lot of guys. Fidel Diggs out of Syracuse, a guy who went to the Shrine Bowl, was probably like a late round 3 guy. He tested out unbelievable. 6'4", 257. He ran a 4.57 40 with a 1.6 10-yard split and a 10.1 broad jump. And I thought he looked quick in terms of his ability to bend, his movement skills in the on-field drills as well. The list keeps going on. Jordan Birch, who ran with this group, but he's kind of like a tweener. He's 6'4", 279. He ran a 4.67 40 with a 1.66 10-yard split. I thought that was impressive. Donovan Azaruka, the edge rusher out of Boston College, didn't run the 40, but his agility drills and his on-the-field drills were unbelievable. His on-the-field drills, you sort of bend, you sort of flexibility, you sort of movement skills. Well, that then showed up when his 20-yard shuttle was 4.19 and his three cone were 6.94. Those are staggering numbers for a guy who I think is a late round 1, early round 2 prospect. So while we didn't get to see him do the full workout today, in terms of what we did see, I thought it was impressive. Some other guys that I thought maybe stood out. Braden Swinson out of LSU. He didn't do the 40-yard dash, but the on-field work for him I thought was really good. His 20-yard shuttle was 4.33. Three cone was 7.13, but I thought he did look really good in the on-field drills. And then another guy I want to talk about, because NFL Network has, or NFL.com, has a lot of next-gen stats where they're really evaluating a lot of different athletic scores. And they had Ja Joyner out of Minnesota as an elite-level athlete from what we saw today. 6'4", 262 pounds. He ran a 4.640, 1.67 10-yard split. And then the testing that they used for the next-gen stats in terms of how quick he did some of the on-field drills showed his miles per hour, showed his explosiveness. So Ja Joyner was another guy who I thought helped himself today. Maybe not with the traditional things that we usually see at the combine, but with some of these next-gen stuff, I thought he really checked off some boxes, showing off his level of athleticism. And then let's round it out with the linebacker group. They concluded the night. A couple big names we didn't get to see do a lot. Carson Schweichinger out of UCLA didn't do any on-field drills or the 40, but what we did see, the limited that we saw of him, is he did one thing. He had a 39.5 vertical jump. I think that level of explosiveness and athleticism shows up on tape. So I thought that was a really impressive performance from him. Obviously, the biggest athletic freak from the linebacker position was Jihad Campbell out of Alabama. He can be a part-time edge rusher. He can be a full-time linebacker. He pretty much is the total package. It's almost 6'3", 235. He ran a 4.52 40, a 1.53 10-yard split. And then he had a 10.7 broad. So he's just checking boxes off. We knew he was a big-time athlete. So he's a guy locked in to round 1, first linebacker off the board. I thought Teddy Buchanan out of California looked really good. He had a 4.6 40 with a 1.59 10-yard split. He had a 40-inch vertical and a 10.5 broad jump, and he was flying in the on-field drills, looking really smooth. He's changing direction. So I thought Teddy Buchanan really helped himself out a lot as well. Eugene Asante out of Auburn, he got it rolling with the linebackers. His first 40-yard time was 4.48 with a 1.52 10-yard split, and that he looked good in the on-field drills as well. A couple other guys that I want to kind of call out here. Nick Martin out of Oklahoma State, 4.53 40, 1.54 10-yard split, 36-inch vert, 38-inch vert, 10.3 broad. So I thought Nick Martin had himself a day and helped himself out. I think one of the surprise athletic testers was UCLA's Kane Medrano, 6'2", 222. So he's definitely on the lighter side, but it translated. 4.46 40 with a 1.57 10-yard dash, 38-inch vert with a 10.5 broad. Looked really fluid. He's going to be a special teams demon, get a chance to play in sub packages. Not going to be a guy who's going to hold up in terms of the run game at 222, but a special teams demon, a guy who can play in sub packages. I thought really helped himself with that high level elite athleticism. And then I'm looking up and down here, though. Danny Stutzman out of Oklahoma had a good day. He's 233 pounds. He ran a 4.52 40, 1.55 10-yard split, at a 34-inch vertical jump, and looked good in the on-field drills as well. Chris Paul, I thought, looked really good in the on-field drills as well. He had a 36-inch vert, 2 to go with it, and 9.9 broad, 4.63 on the 40. He's the guy who's on that like round 3, round 4 bubble. But I thought the linebackers held their own after a long day there. There were a couple guys who really, I wish we would have seen a couple guys do a few more things, but we saw most of the major names there partake at the linebacker group in terms of doing a lot there. So I thought it was a fun way to kind of end the day. We started with, I think it was less than half of the defensive tackles ran. Some did luckily get back into the mix in terms of the on-field drills. And then at the edge rusher group, we had about half there as well. And then the linebacker group, we had a little bit more than half actually run the 40, but a lot of people took place in the on-field drills, and just a lot of the bigger names besides who I mentioned, Carson Schweichinger. He's the only major name that I think near the top of the linebacker rankings we didn't get to see do anything. And then obviously Jelon Walker out of Georgia, all the Georgia guys mostly, held back a little bit in terms of what they did at the combine. But nonetheless, I thought it was a fun day. There was a strong day. I think the linebacker group is solid. I don't think it's got a lot at the top. I think it's got some decent depth. But the D-line and the edge group lived up to the billing of being a year that you want to be drafting 1 or 2, maybe even 3 defensive line prospects with just how many skilled big guys there are. And that's with the fact that we didn't even see some of the best defensive tackle prospects. We didn't even see some of the best edge prospect guys. So it's just going to be more and more stacked once we get the numbers, the pro days on these guys. If you're looking at like rankings, so many good defensive tackle prospects, so many good edge prospects, whatever style you want, they're going to be found first round, second round, third round. Some are going to fall to the fourth round. It is a great draft to double down, take the Eagles approach, take other teams' approach. You can never have enough guys up on the D line. You can never have enough pass rushers, enough guys that can be interior disruptors. This is the class for that. In terms of the quality, I think you can make the case that today's going to be the best day for the combine in terms of the quality of what we see. It's an average O-line group, so that's going to be the last day. Tomorrow, I think we're going to have some good testers. We have the DBs and we have the tight ends, but at the tight end group, we're not going to get arguably the 3 top tight ends in the class. Mason Taylor, Colston Loveland, Elijah Arroyo. So you're not going to see them. You're going to see the corners and the safeties go tomorrow. I think there'll be some fun testers there. And then the running backs, obviously, are going to be great. We'll see how many do everything. But I think the wide receivers this year, it's an average group. So I think in terms of talent level, I think you can make the case today was arguably the most impressive day you're going to see with how many great D-line and defensive tackles and edge guys that we saw today. Could have seen a lot more. A lot of the top guys did sit out, but that's going to be every day this weekend and the rest of the week in terms of the combine. So I'm not going to hold that against them, but it was a fun first day. A lot of rumblings out there, a lot of talk about Matthew Stafford being traded. It sounds like the Raiders might be the team in the lead now, with the Giants also very much in the mix. Could be teams maybe looking to get up to the Titans pick to take either Cam Ward or Shady Sanders. It sounds like that would be Cam Ward if a team is moving up with the Titans. Abdul Carter doesn't need his surgery. Travis Hunter wants to play both ways in the NFL. Some teams view him as a receiver with a little bit of cornerback stuff, some vice versa. That's going to be interesting plot line the entire draft season. And then obviously a lot of stuff heading into free agency, teams, players getting permission from their teams to potentially seek out trades like Jaire Alexander out of Green Bay. So there's a lot going on, as there always is at the NFL Combine. But stay tuned. If you missed anything, I literally live tweeted my thoughts on every single prospect, even the ones who didn't partake in the on-field drills or the 40 testing. I shared my thoughts on them, analyzed them, draft round projection, every single 40 time. I talked about it. Their first time, their second time, and then all my film thoughts, my draft projections, every single player, every single night after the combine coverage ends. I'm going to do an instant reaction podcast as well. So tomorrow night, we'll kick it off with the tight ends. I know for what we do here, usually more emphasis on the offensive skill players. So we'll start the show tomorrow talking about what I saw from the tight end group. Then we'll break down the DBs, the corners, and the safeties. And then obviously the most fun day for the offensive side is on Saturday. We get the quarterbacks, the running backs, and the wide receivers. Podcast after that. And then obviously concluding with Sunday, the offensive lines. There will be a recap show giving my instant reactions to some of the guys that helped their cause, saw impressive testing numbers, or looked good in the on-field drills. If you're enjoying this content, please get over to the website. Fastest and easiest way is S2SFootball.com. Check out our premium content tab, and for $9.99, you get access to all of our premium notebooks. You immediately get the scouting notebook. I am almost done making full updates. Quarterbacks are all done. Running backs are done. Tight ends are done. Wide receivers are done. Only thing I have to do left in that is update their measurements once I get them from the combine. And then the last thing is also just to have in there their updated statistics from this final season. But the scouting notebook, fully updated from everything that I watched since the season has ended, added tons of players. There's easily 100 prospects, if not more, in there from the offensive skill player. You get that immediately. Strengths, weaknesses, or strengths, developmental areas, functional areas, how they win, NFL role, NFL projection, fantasy spin. You get the rankings notebook, which has all our different rankings updated constantly, or draft rankings. It'll have our new dynasty rookie rankings. It has last year's dynasty rookie rankings. It has our Devy rankings. It'll have our tier draft rankings. And then it has our positional dynasty rankings as well. That'll be updated throughout the offseason. And then in April, basically everything that I've been tweeting out with the combine prospects, that is the baseline of what the draft projections notebook offers. 400 players or so in that, tabs for every single position, offense and defense, based on how, from everything we were hearing, reading, listening, we expected to come off the board. Then I have my notes on how they win, their developmental areas, the combine testing is in there, the measurements are in there, and then we have tabs projecting the 32 prospects to go on night one, top 100 prospects to go in rounds 1 through 3, and then our best guess, trying to project every single player to be taken in all 7 rounds. We have had tremendous success in terms of our predicting who is going to come off the board round 1, rounds 1 through 3, and rounds 1 through 7. That comes out about a week or two prior to the NFL draft, and it is updated right up until minutes before the NFL draft kicks off. And then obviously still very valuable even after it. Great resource for the entire draft weekend, and then even the priority free agent signing after the draft concludes. So I hope you enjoyed day 1 of the NFL Combine. Hope you stick here with Saturday to Sunday's coverage. Check out our premium notebooks. If you have never purchased it before, if you've purchased it in the past, we hope you consider purchasing it again. So on behalf of my sound tech engineer, David Nakano, and myself, thank you for joining us, and we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.